Oh, yay. We are talking about things that we avoid and put off in January here at the Our Time to Rise podcast. And that isn't usually a fun conversation, but we are determined to make today fun and determined to come to some solutions because we are going to be talking with our dear friend, Morgan Tyree. Morgan is a professional organizer, or as she says, chaos calmer. I've experienced it firsthand. She is a chaos calmer. She is a writer and fitness instructor. So she is the full package of health and order. And she does it in a way that does not make those of us who struggle in this area feel bad about ourselves. This is not a shaming situation. This is an empowering conversation. Morgan runs her own personal organization and time management business and lives right near me in Colorado with her husband, David, and their 3 children. Morgan invites us to join her on a peaceful path to simplicity. She is absolutely the model in this. And again, she does it in a way that feels friendly and not like you have to take away all of the fun things or all of the she just is about taking away the distractions about what is most important to us. And today we are going to be talking about her newest book that is releasing this month. It is titled Take Back Your Home: How to Organize Every Room for a Stress-Free, Mess-Free, Happy Home. You can connect with Morgan at her website, morganizewithme.com. Okay. So Morgan, here we are, new year. It is a time when many people are decluttering. They are looking at their schedules, how they spend their time, but they're also looking at their homes. And I'm one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Last weekend, I organized my bedroom closet. Probably the last time I did it was a year ago, last January. It was overdue. But this is a time for looking at how we manage our homes. And for the sake of the podcast, we are talking about things we tend to avoid because this January, we don't want to just go back to the closet that we always kind of have half organized or that doesn't intimidate us. We want to go to the place that we never go to because it causes deep stress in our hearts. And some people are going to relate to this and some people are not. But for those of us who really avoid some things as far as home organizing, we are going to solve some problems today. So let's just start there. What areas of the home do you see that people tend to avoid when it comes to getting things in order?
So I think that what I see most often is people avoid storage areas or areas that are not as present or that you see as often because it's kind of that out of sight, out of mind a little bit. And I think those areas can also tend to be really overwhelming because so much is kind of stashed there. We kind of just will put things in the basement or put things in the garage because it's storage. And so that can be often an area that people avoid because it can feel very daunting because it can just look like a lot of chaos if you've just been throwing stuff in there for a long time. So I think that's one of the main spaces. And then I also find that people will tend to put off or avoid going through memorabilia because or maybe they want to go through it, but it's like there's that emotional, like it might bring up good memories, sad memories. And then there's that, it can be a harder topic or area to really declutter because it'll depend on how you're emotionally tied to those memories and how you view keepsakes and memories. So those would be, I think, kind of the things that I would say I see the most often being put off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense because that storage space, which is where you dump the things you don't know what to do with, by its very nature is filled with things you don't know what to do with. So,
Exactly.
of course, they're going to cause stress and you're going to avoid going through them. And then memorabilia. Okay, let's talk about that for a minute. That's things that we think we should keep because we think they should be important to us, but we're not totally convinced, or what are they? That's my go-to.
That is one, definitely. I think that there's that I see this a lot where there's memorabilia that you've been given. So
Mhm.
it's other people's memorabilia that was important to them and they want you to maybe keep it. Um, and then it's I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's hard for people to quantify sometimes how much memorabilia you should keep.
Yes.
Not that there's not like a black and white answer to that, but I think that's where people get stuck because it's like, well, am I going to, miss if I don't keep all of my baby's baby clothes, or they ask these questions that there's really not a right answer per se, but it's each person deciding sort of what their value is around it, how much they want to keep. So that, but I do see on the first thing I talked about, I feel like a lot of people have kind of a pressure and an expectation to hold on to things, even though, a perfect example is you've been given someone's, fine china and then you don't like to even entertain, but yet you've got the
Mhm.
box in the basement, so, and those situations are kind of sticky because you do want to be sensitive to others in your life, but that is, I think, why those things are more avoided because they're just they're very layered, which is really what I talk about in the book is that organizing, I think we think of a lot of how to, and I really wanted the first part or really half the book to talk about the why we're stuck because we all need the how to, but if we don't process the why we're stuck, then we often don't really move through the how to very well because we keep going back to being stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say you walk into a client's home
Mm-hmm.
and you identify a couple of areas that they have been avoiding. It's clear, like you ask them, what's the most chaotic place in your home? And you open the door to a cupboard or a closet and you agree. This is
Mm-hmm.
not a good situation.
This is not working.
What are some questions that you ask them, or how do you start the conversation with someone?
So, so do you mean specifically like which area to start in, or in that particular area we've already picked, or both?
Let's say both.
Both.
So,
Okay.
how do you
Yeah.
decide which area to start with? And then
Yes.
once you pick
And then
one,
once you get there,
mhm,
yeah. So it really is very dependent on obviously the person's home setup, what their stressors are, what their pain points are. But let's just like for an easy example, is I have someone who's like, I really just want to overhaul my house. I'm just tired. Not so much that they like have so much, but they're just like, I want better systems. I want my rooms to flow better. I want to have homes for things. Oftentimes, I'll have us start in the basement or storage area, whatever that looks like, or garage. And that doesn't sound very exciting. But when we set up a storage area, it allows us to then, as we process other areas and we have extras or things that aren't needing to be in the prime real estate, but we want them to still be in the home, it allows us, like an easy example is if you've already organized your storage room and then you run across some extra home decor items, well, you've got a box that you can go put them in the basement, right?
mhm,
Whereas if you haven't done the storage space first and you're, decluttering your living room, then it's almost like you don't move the needle as well because you then add more chaos to the storage room. So that's kind of one example that works well if you're really talking about a whole kind of house kind of approach. But some people will call me in for just like, let's say closet, because you use that
mhm,
example. And I'm actually helping a client right now, and we did her entire closet and we just went through, and she just wanted it to be more aesthetically pleasing. She wanted to thin out the things she didn't wear, so we took time and she tried things on. So when it comes to a particular space, the questions I really ask people is what's important to you, because I want everyone to feel like they're moving towards the goal that they want, because I don't want to come in, like, I'm pretty detailed, but if I come into someone who's less detailed than me or more visual, then we need to set up a system that's going to work for them. So
mhm.
I just ask a lot of open-ended questions and really talk about kind of what their end goal is, what they're looking to achieve, and then that's kind of what we keep working towards, because there's not like one cookie cutter approach per se as far as how to do it, and everyone has a different view on how they want things done or what's going to work for them. So lots of questions.
Yeah. So, can you give some examples of what people's end goals might be that are
Mhm.
different?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, for some people, they're just like, I am tired of not being able to find, fill in the blank.
Hmm.
Or like looking for things. So in that situation, which is a really big goal in organizing, is just creating homes for people and just, like what goes where. So like, okay, let's put all the light bulbs together and all the batteries together, that sort of thing. And then other people, that's a real practical need and
Hmm.
really a necessity too. But then I have some people who are just all about aesthetics. Like they're just like, I want to walk in and just feel like my pantry is pretty, or I want to walk in and feel like my kids' playroom is, very orderly or whatever,
Hmm.
so that then we lean more into that. But I'm also really careful that I keep them in the lane of reality because I feel
Hmm.
like we see a lot of inspiration in media and it's beautiful, but it's just like looking at a home decor book. Like your living room doesn't usually look, picture ready. So, it's kind of finding that sweet spot for each person as far as what they like. But it's funny, I've actually had a couple clients recently who have both told me like, oh, we're very type A. Like we just are very like detailed. And so I think sometimes people think organizers are only hired by people that can't find their stuff. And then
Hmm.
there is people on the other end of the continuum who just want it even nicer, even
Yeah.
tidier. So that's been kind of funny. They're like, we're really type A. I'm like, okay. Um, so yeah, I think people have different goals, but I think the common theme though, no matter what your goal is you're looking for more peace. You're looking to come home and have your home be more of a sanctuary than just a place of stress, because our homes, I really believe, should serve us. And so by equipping, giving yourself the tools to keep your home managed, it has a very positive ripple effect for sure.
Hmm. So you mentioned the word systems
Mm-hmm.
earlier, and systems are what keep the house going and
Mm-hmm.
quote unquote organized, if that's your
Mm-hmm.
goal,
Mm-hmm.
over time.
Yeah.
But how much of your work really is putting systems into place rather than finding places for things to just be stored?
Really, a lot of it is, I mean, because it also probably depends how you define system, but I think that what I find a lot is I'll go to work with someone and they just haven't really thought about like where they've put stuff. They've moved into
Hmm.
their kitchen and just put things away. But they didn't really think through like, oh, why did I put the spices in like the back of the pantry when like I cook at the stove? And I mean, it's just thinking about sort of like how you live life. And so
Hmm.
I would say systems, they just play a very big role. And it's kind of talking through with my clients, like, okay, back to those tensions and like pressure points. So like what is it that's like okay, are your kids having a hard time getting their backpacks every day, or like these tangible things? And so then we can talk through like, okay, so maybe we need 3 hooks for the backpacks and like everyone needs to know where they go. So I don't think a system can kind of sound like fancy when really it's making something intuitive as opposed to like no no plan in place. And
Hmm.
there's just places where those extra steps really decrease your day-to-day steps, because you're
Hmm.
able to like just quickly get stuff done and not have to like think so much harder. Those decisions are kind of made for you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as someone who might be the person who can't find their keys, like I am on the, I don't know, more disorganized side when it comes to my space. I can be very
Mm-hmm.
organized about other things,
Mm-hmm.
but around my space, it
Yeah.
can be quite chaotic. And I can walk through a room and just block it all out. I can
Uh,
just ignore it. And I know for some people that sounds insane,
yeah.
but for those of you like me, that you get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have had to discipline myself on things like systems, like the hooks, for
Yeah.
example.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you say that, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Okay, let's do that. And then I will kind of maintain it
Mm-hmm.
because it becomes a habit. You have
Right.
to do it enough times that it just becomes
Yes.
intuitive, is the word you
Mm-hmm.
used, but a habit. And then it's helpful.
Right.
Um, and so over time, I would say I have gotten better,
Mm-hmm.
but I am not at the place I want to be because
Mm-hmm.
again, it goes against my natural
Mm-hmm.
bent.
Right.
And so I think for people who are thinking through like I just can't live that way because
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that way,
Mm-hmm.
there is an element of maybe you need some help, like
Yeah.
someone like you coming in and saying,
Yeah.
"How about some hooks?" And you can say, "Oh yeah, good idea."
Yeah.
but also it's just the getting in the habit of doing it.
Yes.
And then you're so happy when you can find the keys.
Yes.
So,
Right.
yeah, I'm all for it. And I
Mhm.
know for some people it comes naturally and for others it doesn't. Okay. So
Definitely.
let's talk about your book. I'm
Mhm.
wondering first if we would like to talk about the quiz in the
Sure.
book.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the quiz and then I'll tell you about my experience taking it.
Yes. Yeah. So I did there's a organizing shape quiz, and they're just talking about how you're shaped, because this actually ties into what you were just talking about as far as how you're wired, how your bent is. And I just want to say to the listeners that, to give yourself a lot of grace, because I don't want anyone to feel like discouraged about organizing. I think the question to ask yourself, kind of back to that goal, is, are there one or two areas where your life is more stressful because you don't have a system? And just kind
Mhm.
of answer that question. And it's okay if you have certain areas of your home that are more relaxed and casual and you have piles. Like, if things are working for you, don't be hard on yourself. It's where there's things, I would identify the things that aren't working or that are causing you more stress or more time. And a lot of times more money, because we'll go buy things when we already have them or whatever. So I would identify one or two things and just focus on that. Maybe that's just getting a hook for your keys as an example,
Mhm.
right? Don't, but I just want, I really try to give my clients that permission to, like, let's talk about why we're organizing and not just try to achieve something as this big ultimate goal that really isn't that important for, what our true values are for how we want to live. And so pressing into who you are. So anyway, back to the shapes, and that, so I provide the quiz to help the reader understand, like, we all are wired differently. So if you can kind of identify where you fall, because like you kind of mentioned, there's some of us that are just detailed and more type A by nature, right? Or there's people that are more relaxed and need their stuff very much around them. And so there's 4 different shapes, and then you can take the quiz, and there's arrows, which very driven, very like organized by nature, leader types. Bolts are, the parties, the free spirits, a little bit. Circles generally care about their environment, but are maybe a little more relaxed as well, but they're very maybe more into aesthetics. And then the diamonds are probably the most naturally organized. Like, I think of those like our engineers, the people that,
Mhm.
are accountants, we'll say, people good with detail. Generally, it seems like if your mind is kind of more wired that way, you generally kind of do better with your environment, pretty kind of streamlined and that sort of thing. So the quiz is a starting place to kind of say, okay, I'm wired this way. And then a good question to ask is, how is my significant other wired, and how is my
Mhm.
child wired? Because I have coached a lot of parents as well about really allowing your child to live and organize in the way they are naturally wired, and that might be letting go of some standards. And I do want to just say, just to give a little tidbit, and I share this in the book, but I share that I don't ever make my bed. Like, it's not made right now. So like, and my only point in sharing that is that, like, I need certain things tidy for my like daily functioning. That's not one of them. And I don't really care that it's not made. Would I prefer it to be made? Sure, but it's not a high enough priority, and it doesn't affect my day. I know there's
Mhm.
philosophies out there that that's supposed to, like, that's the end all be all to how your day goes, and it's just not my experience. So just keeping that in mind, that like, let certain things go and be totally fine with that. It'll
Mm.
give you freedom to do the other things that are more important.
Yeah. Yeah. And what is freedom for you may not be freedom for somebody else. And
Exactly.
that's where we get into the personalities of people we live with and share a space with.
Yes.
We both have college freshmen, so like that's a great example of like on hyperspeed being introduced to this idea of living in a tiny space with someone that you don't know.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Right.
Okay, so I took the quiz
Yes. What
this
are
week
you? Mm-hmm.
and I took it with my two youngest daughters. So we each
Okay.
answered all of the questions. It was a very
Okay.
fun
Okay.
conversation starter
Yeah.
because you ask about more than just space. You ask
Yeah.
about how you approach different scenarios, different parts of your
Yeah.
life.
Mm-hmm.
So we were all circles,
Mm-hmm.
all three of us.
I was gonna guess you were a circle. Yeah.
And, but I'm not very aesthetic. I tend to be
Well. Yeah.
so, but what the circle was a little more relaxed,
Yeah.
right? And I do care. I liked how you said that. I do care about it, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a little more relaxed about it. Like if
Mm-hmm.
there are dirty dishes in the sink, I can go to bed. I can.
Yeah. Or
And
like a diamond or arrow probably wouldn't be as,
mhm.
able to do that as well. Right.
But I also had some diamond in me, which
Mm-hmm.
was interesting
Mm.
because I do tend to think like in processes,
Yeah.
like in other areas of my life. I think A, B, C.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Analytical kind of, yeah.
but because I'm okay, I'm a little more relaxed with my environment.
Yeah.
The circle was stronger. Whereas my younger two
Mm-hmm.
daughters, I would say aesthetic is more important to them than it
Mm-hmm.
is to me.
Mm-hmm.
And they were definitely stronger
On
in the
that. Yeah.
circle.
Yeah.
So it was a great tool to just think through, okay, I can see how asking me about this part of my life might indicate how I approach my space at
Mm-hmm.
home
Right.
and how I want people to feel when they walk in our home and
Mm-hmm.
the vibe that I want to give, and then also how I'm naturally wired and interact with the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a great little quiz.
Yeah.
And it was a great way to start into the book. So now let's go
Yeah.
into common roadblocks that you think keep people from really diving into a particular space, avoiding,
Yeah.
really.
And this was the part I was so excited to dive into because it just really talks about, I share 7 different clients and then 7 different, I call them organizing snags. And I didn't by any means cover every single, snag out there, but I resonated with these 7 that I kind of see over and over again. And I just really hope that people will see some of those snags that maybe are keeping them stuck. And so, I'll share one example, or one of the chapters is on experiences. And it's one of my dear clients here that I've worked with off and on for several years. And he had we worked with him, we worked a lot with him on paper organizing. So nothing very fancy, but just,
Mm-hmm.
processing mail. And we have tried multiple systems, and finally we got him to a system that worked. He's very visual. Um, we couldn't tuck things away too much, and we had to really come up with some systems. But through our conversations, I finally peeled back what I call the layer of the organizing onion. And he he was really stuck with, he would get his mail, but he didn't want to open it. And we finally, like, as we talked through, I'm like, well, so why is that to her? Like, what's going on? And then he basically said that he just remembered his parents fighting over bills, and
Mm-hmm.
he saw that as bills and money and payments. And so to him, even though he's an elderly gentleman, this string of that experience was playing into his inability today to open the mail. Like, he would get it and we'd have this schedule for him, but he just couldn't stick to it. And so in that situation, I encouraged him to do some journaling and some deeper work, and to just kind of like, well, why is that? Like, this is your new normal, right? But like, how do we process through that? And so that's just one example, but how some past experience you may have had can really show up in the present without you even realizing it, and keep you stuck in a way that you're having a hard time working through. And so, for him, it was him doing some deeper work on kind of the why, and then also kind of reframing his mindset around paper. And then also we had to be really strategic with like his system, because I think his default is to avoid the paper. That's just going to
Mm-hmm.
always be something he's going to fight against. And so
Mm-hmm.
kind of pushing him through that, because I'm really proud of him, because I actually had him write an endorsement for the book. When he relocated to Colorado several years ago, he wanted to live a new kind of life, because he used to never want to go home, because he just wanted to avoid the mess of that he created at
Mm-hmm.
home. And so he moved over here with half of his stuff, and then we just really have worked hard together. And I mean, he's done the hard work as far as keeping it up. So that's just one example of a snag. But I go into the 7 different ones and really talk about kind of like the examples that my clients have shared, or what I've seen from them, and sort of how to like work through that, and what are some tools to kind of remove that snag somewhat. It might always be there for you, but you
Mm-hmm.
can find a way through it to work towards your goal.
Yeah. So I would think naming it is
Yes.
so for him, that process that you led him through, was that a new realization for him that the reason I'm not opening the mail is because of childhood experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he probably had it there, like, under the surface, but I don't know that he had actually, like, connected the dots fully, you know? It
Mm-hmm.
was more like, um, yeah, he had to kind of, like, really connect it and go, "Okay, this is the bigger why."
Mm-hmm.
'Cause, I mean, I mean, we tried, like, 3 different systems, and I'm, like, kinda like, I was like, I can't, like, I don't know how to fix this. Like, we got to figure out why, And so that's what has really been on my heart with so many of my clients is like, I don't want to put band-aids on. I want to help them kind of get to a better healing place so they can have some freedom from that, and be able to move forward.
Yeah. And I would think that the areas that we avoid probably are the areas that have a deeper
Yes.
something there. Because
Yes.
if it's just like, I've just had a busy week, or
Yes.
the Costco stuff, I don't know where to put it,
Hmm.
that might not be something that we're avoiding. It's just a reality we have to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when we're avoiding it, it means that we're really putting off dealing with it, which means
Hmm.
there's something else going on.
Yes.
And that's where you become a little bit
Hmm.
more of a investigator and then counselor as you
Yeah.
counsel people through facing that thing you're
Yeah.
avoiding. So
Yeah.
maybe the first thing is asking that why,
Hmm.
naming it.
Hmm.
It's less scary, has
Yes.
less power over us when we can say it out
Hmm.
loud.
Hmm.
And then figuring out, okay, was that all I needed?
Right.
Or do I need to change how I'm doing things with that new knowledge?
Right. Yeah. What adjustments you might want to make. Yeah.
Mhm.
Exactly.
And I
Yeah.
like that you said because it's so core to him, he's probably always going to struggle with it.
Hmm.
So that information is helpful. And
Yeah.
at the same time, you're empowering him
Hmm.
by saying, and you can still deal with it by doing these things.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. The benefit will outweigh for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah. And, I was going to share on another snag, because it kind of ties in and there is the reality, like we just get busy in life. But one of the snags I did list was schedules, because what I see a lot is that, people are filling up their schedules a lot,
Hmm.
and I'm not, I think, I just think sometimes we're doing it unintentionally, but the effect of that is that our homes will show for it, right? Like we have to find margin to maintain our homes. And so I give some real tangible just tips of like, can you delegate some things? Can you outsource some things? Are there some things or some changes you can make? Just whether it's expectations or traditions you're doing in your house. But I just feel like that's a pain point that I see a lot, and especially a lot of times it falls, a lot of responsibility is falling on women. And I just want to empower, all of us that are maintaining homes to, like, if you're feeling really stretched, like what could you possibly adjust, you know what I mean? Because there's just the reality, we could get busy. I'm not talking about just general business. I'm talking about, like, if you just don't have the margin, your organizing is going to always be on the back burner, right? or
Hmm.
or maintaining your house. And that's also kind of back to our what spaces we put off. I'll usually tell people in our consultation, like, the reason organizing is hard, in my opinion, or hard to get to or hard to do, is because it falls down the to-do list. It's not usually the top, because I feel like there's all these immediate things that we just have to do every day, like walk the dog, cook
Hmm.
dinner. There's these things that, like, we can't just say no to it in the present. And so, the challenges with organizing is keeping it a priority. And so, I think intentional scheduling and intentionally, like, talking amongst the people you live with, those two things can go really far too. And that's just a very practical side to it. But I would say that's a snag I'm seeing more and more, is that I'm like, well, there's, you're kind of wanting the impossible. Like, you don't have the time to
Hmm.
do these things in your home, but you want them done, so how do we fix that tension?
Yeah. And prioritizing
Hmm.
is a discipline.
Yes.
So my trick is I'm going to schedule something where I know people are going to see that space.
Nice.
It's
That's
people that
perfect.
don't live with me, because then it moves it up the priority list.
Right.
And
Yes.
then I do schedule, like, okay, this night before we have people over tomorrow, I am going to clean the kitchen because
Perfect.
I
Yeah.
know that it needs
Yeah.
to happen.
Nice.
So Plan a party.
Well, but I think that's so smart because whenever you create a deadline for
Mm-hmm.
yourself, I mean, assuming you'll let the deadline motivate you, but that is a really good tool. Because I think that is the problem is we're like, well, I'll get to the storage area, I'll get to my photo albums, but we don't create a map or any kind of plan. And then it will just continue to kind of shift down the list, most likely, just because
Mm-hmm.
things kind of fight for our attention, don't they?
Yeah, right. Because the kids do have to be picked up from school.
Yeah. There's just
So
life.
I'm going to go do that instead of
Smart.
cleaning this corner.
Yeah.
So, yeah, create that
Yeah.
tension.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I need an external factor. I do not do well, I know this about myself, with
Mm-hmm.
self-imposed deadlines. I need
Yeah.
someone
Have
else to
someone
be
else.
counting on the
Exactly.
deadline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any other snags you want to talk about?
Let's see. Okay, I'll talk about one of my favorites. So, because this one feels like it rises to the top, and that's I called it purchases. So, what I have seen a lot of is we'll call it abundance. So it seems to me like I'll be in someone's house and there's zero judgment, but it's just an observation of like, but why is there let's say we'll just use closet. Why are there so many clothes in this closet? Like, why can I barely get the hanger back on the rod? Um, and what I've seen is a common thread is for a lot of people, if they weren't, if maybe they didn't have as much growing up, or they felt like they did without on some things, or there's some, kind of some
Mm-hmm.
triggers there that now they're living in this adult life and they have a different income stream and they have, different spending powers. They kind of swing the pendulum the other way. Like I'm like, okay, so it totally makes sense, like from just
Mm-hmm.
a logical standpoint, but it's interesting how emotional it is because they're buying all this to kind of fill that like lack of what they didn't have, and so and I share about Stacy in the book, and she was an amazing client because I'll be honest, it was overwhelming the amount of things we were processing because she'd fallen into a tendency of boxing things up when she was having people over. So like you, she had a deadline,
Mm-hmm.
but and this is something to avoid if you can. There's nothing wrong with a catch-all basket, but if you continue to create
Mm-hmm.
baskets, it'll be like that storage room you don't want to go into. And so we were going through boxes and things that just had so many items in it. And so what I was proud with her is that she moved from a place in the beginning. She had a really hard time letting anything go, and it could be things that just were, not needed, or all these small things. But as she moved along, she started to see the need for letting go of those things, and then as we worked through things, it always feels good when you go, oh, I know where this goes downstairs in this drawer and this
Mm-hmm.
goes here, so and she was really cute because probably her big epiphany was we created a whole backstock of like her health and beauty products. And I said, so listen, this is your target. Like, we're not going to go buy more stuff until you need to you have to like lower this inventory before you replenish anything, but we got all of it in one spot. She didn't really know how much she had. And it was this thing. So, but she had a real, kind of growth through all of that. Cause I think she kind of got sick and tired of like, she did not want to live that way anymore, but she had to really dig into like, okay, I'm going to be an intentional shopper. And that's really what I do share as just like my overall theme to anyone is be an intentional shopper. That alone has such an effect on how much you have to manage in your life. And that can even be, don't take the free flyer that they're handing you or
Mm-hmm.
the free magnet for your fridge. Just don't take things you don't need, you know what I mean? And shop with a list. So yeah, but purchases, I think a lot of people will resonate with that because it can be really challenging to push through that emotional, kind of all those feelings, and by no means is there a right number of things to have, but I think it's the question to ask yourself, like, does my home, does my closet, do my spaces feel the way I want them to feel? Because if they're not and you're feeling overwhelmed, then that's when you want to address it. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. I will say my big purge this winter break was books.
Oh yeah.
And it was hard. We get sent a lot of books for the
Yeah.
podcast. So
Yeah.
they just multiply. Like I had one arrive today that I did not ask
Mm-hmm.
for and I will not read. And
Yeah.
that's an easy one for me to give away.
Yeah.
but I also have a lot of friends who have written books.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I've purchased a lot of books as research for books I've written.
I know. Yeah.
And so it was at a crisis point. I needed to get rid of
Mm-hmm.
a lot of books.
Mm-hmm.
It,
Right.
but there was a little bit of that emotional part.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I need to keep this because she wrote it and I love her.
I
And
know.
what if she came over, which she's not going to because she doesn't even live in my state. But
Right.
what if she came over and I didn't have her book? Like,
Yeah.
those are the things.
Yeah. Those are things we think about. Oh,
And I
totally.
had to give myself permission to no, I'm
Mm-hmm.
giving that book away. And when it's at the Goodwill, it can be a blessing to somebody
Yeah.
else.
Well, and I think, yeah, that's true too, because we just moved, you know, and I've been going through my books too. And it's like, I I would like in some ways to keep all the books, but then I'm like, I had to ask myself, I'm not going to reread most of these, let's be honest. And I also really do a lot of reading on my iPad. And so, you know, I think that's a great point that you're making, is that it's okay to let things go, because one way to look at it is like someone else may not read the book, and rather than it sitting on your shelf for the next 15 years, you know. So that's a way to pay it forward. So yeah, I mean, it's not, deciding what we keep is not easy to do. It's tricky. It's layered, for sure.
And that for sure was an area I was avoiding. I was
Mm-hmm.
very much avoiding that. And everyone in my family would say I had been, because there was a big stack
Yeah.
waiting. And the reason that I had a deadline was because my daughter was having friends over and she was like, Mom, can you
There
deal
you
with these
go.
books?
Yeah.
Yes, I can. I said, I want that. I want that deadline. I want
Yeah.
that motivation.
I want to. That's great.
But as
Yeah.
far as like the overspending, I
Mm-hmm.
think I see that too with people who maybe are making up for things in
Mm-hmm.
their childhood, but also just making up for bad feelings. I mean, there's
Oh,
this idea of retail therapy
yes. Yeah.
that
Well, we're just such a consumer society. I mean, we just like, shopping is a like hobby. And I think internet shopping in some ways is super efficient and easy, but it's also like you can buy and spend money so much faster. So yeah, I think it's just, the more people go back to how they want their home to feel and then use that as a filter when they're shopping or when they're acquiring things, that will help. And then like, and this is, I'm not kidding, but I kind of am kidding, but you should move like more often than not, or at least pretend like you're moving, because when you have to touch everything you own, it opens your eyes to like, why do we have, you know, fill in the blank, you know? So there's just some beauty and simplicity and not feeling like you have too much to manage in every room.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, well, thank you, Morgan. Thank you for helping us get out of some of our patterns of
Mhm.
avoidance. Do you have any last words of wisdom for our listeners as they consider what they might be avoiding in their homes?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, avoidance is so normal and we all do it. And so don't be hard on yourself about that. But if there's something you're really ready to make a change with, figure out what tools you need. And I love your idea of a deadline. I think that accountability, and that can be, you know, if you want to go through your closet, invite your friend over to help you, you know, like invite someone that's going to be a truth teller and help you weed it out, and make them take the closest donations when they leave, you know, or whatever. But building that accountability and be really realistic. Cause I think sometimes I'll have people reach out and they're like, I want my whole house organized in 2 months. And, you know, just to work small, work one drawer at a time. Just kind of keep it on the forefront of your mind that the more you process things on a regular basis, the less you're going to have that huge room you've got to go into and deal with, you know. And if you do have a big room you need to deal with, then that's where a team approach is helpful. I usually only work for 4 hours at a time with clients. That's kind of our max, unless I'm doing like an unpack, because you know, it's, you need a chunk of time, but don't be like, I'm gonna do a 12-hour day, because you just get burnt out. Like, give yourself a solid amount of time and get after it. But accountability is everything, and just be gentle with yourself, but fix the things that you really want fixed, because it'll pay dividends, I promise.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.